On December 21st, 2022, a phone stayed silent. For 50 years, that phone had rung every single December, without fail, from the same man, asking the same question. This time, it never rang. And the man waiting for it had no idea that the friend on the other end was already gone. Here is a football player who won a Super Bowl ring, 4 trips to the Pro Bowl, 2 first-team All-Pro selections, a franchise record that still stands after 50 years. A man who was once so feared that opposing coaches built entire game plans just to avoid him. And yet, if you searched for his name inside the Pro Football Hall of Fame today, you would find absolutely nothing. No bust, no plaque, no bronze statue in Canton, Ohio. Just silence. The same kind of silence that filled that phone on December 21st. This is the story of Phil Villapiano, the man who gave the Oakland Raiders his body, his blood, and his heart, and somehow became the player professional football forgot to remember. To understand why that phone call mattered so much, you have to go back to where Phil Villapiano came from. He was born in Long Branch, New Jersey in 1949, and he grew up on the Jersey Shore, a place that builds a certain kind of person. Tough, loud, loyal to a fault. He played his high school football bouncing between Asbury Park and Ocean Township, and even then, coaches noticed something different about him. He wasn't the biggest kid on the field. He wasn't the fastest kid either, not on paper. But he hit like he was trying to prove something to the whole world, and he never stopped. Teammates from that era remember a kid who treated every single practice like it was the fourth quarter of a championship game, because on the Jersey Shore, nobody handed you anything. You earned it, snap after snap, or you went home. Villapiano took that fire to Bowling Green State University, where he played defensive end for 3 years straight. He became a 2-time All-Conference selection, and in 1970, his senior year, he was named the best defensive player in the entire Mid-American Conference. Scouts started paying attention, not because he was flashy, because he was relentless. Most teams saw a college defensive end who might be too small to survive against NFL offensive tackles. The Oakland Raiders saw something else entirely. They saw a man built to chase, to cover, to fly from one sideline to the other and still have enough force left in his body to knock a grown man off his feet. In 1971, the Raiders took a chance on him in the second round of the NFL Draft, the 45th pick overall, and moved him from defensive end to linebacker. They didn't know it yet, but they had just found the heartbeat of a dynasty. Villapiano walked into that Raiders locker room as a rookie, and the Raiders locker room in 1971 was not a gentle place. It was full of outlaws, rebels, and future legends, men who didn't care what the rest of the league thought of them. It should have swallowed a rookie whole. Instead, Villapiano thrived in it. He led the team in tackles that year. He was named the American Football Conference's Defensive Rookie of the Year. And then, on October 4th, 1971, the entire country found out who he was. The Raiders traveled to Cleveland Municipal Stadium for a Monday Night Football game, back when Monday Night Football was still brand new and every broadcast felt like a national event. Howard Cosell sat in the booth that night, the most powerful voice in American sports television, a man who could make or break a career with a single sentence spoken into a microphone. Oakland dominated the Browns that evening, winning 34-20, and all night long Cosell kept circling back to the same rookie linebacker flying around the field, making plays no one expected from a second-round pick who had barely unpacked his bags in Oakland. Millions of people watched at home. By the time the broadcast ended, Phil Villapiano wasn't just a Raider anymore. He was a name people remembered. But the moment that would define his career, the moment that would follow him for the rest of his life, came 14 months later, on December 23, 1972. The Raiders were in the playoffs, facing the Pittsburgh Steelers inside a roaring stadium. Clinging to a 1-point lead with under 30 seconds left on the clock, Pittsburgh had the ball. 4th down, one final shot, needing a miracle just to stay alive. Terry Bradshaw dropped back under pressure and fired a desperate pass down the middle of the field. It deflected off a collision near midfield. It bounced backward through the air, tumbling end over end, the kind of moment where an entire season seems to hang in the balance for one impossible second. And somehow, against every law of probability, it dropped perfectly into the arms of a Pittsburgh running back who was sprinting straight up the sideline, right past the one linebacker assigned to stop him. That linebacker was Phil Villapiano. He had done exactly what his assignment told him to do. He had covered his man. And still, the ball found its way past him anyway. The play would go down in history as the Immaculate Reception, the single most famous moment in the history of the National Football League, replayed and argued over for the next 50 years. Pittsburgh won the game. Oakland's season ended in stunned silence, a locker room full of grown men staring at the floor, unable to process what they had just watched happen. And Villapiano, the man standing closest to the most controversial touchdown ever scored, became a permanent character in the most replayed 60 seconds of football ever recorded. For most players, a moment like that would breed nothing but bitterness for the rest of their lives. For Villapiano, it would eventually become something else entirely, something almost nobody saw coming. But that part of the story comes later. The Raiders didn't fall apart after that loss. If anything, Villapiano got angrier, hungrier, better. 2 years later, on December 21, 1974, Oakland faced the Miami Dolphins in the playoffs, the two-time defending Super Bowl champions. With less than a minute left, Oakland's Ken Stabler threw a desperation touchdown pass to Clarence Davis to take the lead, 28-26. It became known as the Sea of Hands game, one of the greatest playoff finishes anyone had ever witnessed. But the story wasn't finished. 24 seconds remained on the clock, and Miami got the ball back with one final desperate chance to answer. Bob Grease dropped back and threw downfield, searching for a miracle of his own. Phil Villapiano stepped in front of the pass and intercepted it near midfield, killing Miami's last hope before it ever had a chance to breathe. He didn't just survive that game, he ended it with his own two hands on the very last play. By the mid-1970s, Villapiano wasn't just a good player anymore. He was one of the most feared linebackers in professional football. He made the Pro Bowl 4 straight years, from 1973 through 1976. He was named a first-team All-Pro in both 1975 and 1976, the two highest individual honors a defensive player could earn. Teammates called him Foo, and opposing offenses game-planned around him, terrified of his speed sideline to sideline. He wasn't the biggest man on the Raiders' defense, and he never tried to be. He beat blockers with quickness and instinct, reading a play before it fully developed, and closing the distance before the running back even realized he had been found. Back then, the NFL didn't officially track individual tackles the way it does today. If it had, football historians believe Villapiano would have ranked among the league leaders nearly every single season of his career. His impact simply wasn't written down the way it should have been. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should. Remember it. Then came the moment every Raider from that era still talks about. The moment his entire career had been building toward. January 9, 1977. Super Bowl the 11th. Oakland against the Minnesota Vikings, in front of a massive crowd at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Early in the game, Minnesota blocked a Raiders punt and took over just 3 yards from the end zone, one play away from seizing control of the biggest game of the season and shifting the entire momentum of the Super Bowl. The Raiders' defense had its back against its own goal line, and everyone in that stadium knew exactly how much was riding on the next few seconds. 2 plays later, Brent McClanahan of the Vikings tried to punch the ball across the goal line for the score. Phil Villapiano met him head-on and hit him so violently that the ball came loose from his arms. His teammate Willie Hall recovered the fumble on the ground. The momentum of the entire Super Bowl shifted in that single instant, and the Raiders never looked back. Later in that same game, Villapiano became the only Raider to sack Hall of Fame quarterback Fran Tarkenton. Oakland won the championship, 32-14. Phil Villapiano had his Super Bowl ring, earned on the single biggest defensive play of the biggest game of his life. It should have been the beginning of an even greater run. Instead, injuries started catching up to him. His 1977 season ended after just 2 games. He fought his way back in 1978, and even recorded a rare defensive safety that year, but the Raiders' defense around him was changing, and so was his role. After the 1979 season, 9 years into his career in Oakland, the team that he had defined as much as any player in its history let him go. It was a jarring end to a partnership that had built a dynasty. He signed with the Buffalo Bills, where he spent 4 more seasons as a steady, reliable veteran presence on a talented young linebacking core, mentoring players half a decade younger than him who had grown up watching his highlights. Injuries limited him to just 13 games across his final 2 seasons, his body finally slowing down after more than a decade of collisions. In 1983, at 34 years old, Phil Villapiano played his last professional football game. When the numbers were finally added up, they told a remarkable story. In 9 seasons with the Raiders, Villapiano played in 118 games and started 117 of them. He recorded 11 career interceptions for 160 return yards, including an 82-yard touchdown. He recovered 17 fumbles, still the most in franchise history to this day. His 4 Pro Bowl selections remain tied for the most ever by a Raiders outside linebacker, tied with a player who is already enshrined in Canton, Ohio. Across 13 total NFL seasons with Oakland and Buffalo, he played in 163 games. He won a Super Bowl. He was named to 2 first-team All-Pro squads. By almost every measure football uses to judge greatness, Phil Villapiano checked every single box. And yet, decades after he threw his last hit, Phil Villapiano has never been inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This is where his story stops being about one man and starts being about an entire era of professional football that the league seems determined to forget. Villapiano is not alone. Not even close. Jack Tatum, one of the most feared safeties who ever lived, a man opposing receivers genuinely feared to line up against, is not in the Hall of Fame. George Atkinson, his teammate in that same legendary secondary, spent an entire decade terrorizing offenses, and is not in the Hall of Fame either. Lester Hayes, a shutdown cornerback with a drawer full of interceptions and a reputation that once made quarterbacks throw the other direction on purpose, waited decades and is still waiting today. Jim Plunkett won 2 Super Bowls as Oakland's quarterback and was named Most Valuable Player of one of them, a resume that gets most quarterbacks a bust within a few years of retirement, and he is still on the outside looking in, year after year, watching other names get called instead of his own. Even the men who eventually made it in were forced to wait an unforgivable amount of time. Ken Stabler, the league's most valuable player in 1974, wasn't inducted until 2016. A full year after he had already passed away. Tom Flores, a Super Bowl winning head coach and one of only 2 men in NFL history to win championships as a player, an assistant coach and a head coach, had to wait until 2021 to finally get his call. Cliff Branch, one of the most explosive deep threats of his generation, wasn't inducted until 2022, 3 years after he had died. Do you see the pattern forming here? Football historians and analysts have pointed to the same explanation again and again. The Raiders of the 1970s built their entire identity on being outsiders. Owner Al Davis fought the rest of the league in courtrooms almost as often as his team fought opponents on the field, clashing with the NFL office over relocation, over television rights, over control of his own franchise. The team wore black, played with a snarl that other franchises resented, and wore that villain reputation like a badge of honor. It made them unforgettable to fans everywhere. It may have made them invisible to the small, private committee of voters who quietly decide who gets remembered forever in Canton. Add to that the simple fact that individual tackle statistics from Villapiano's era were never officially recorded by the league, and you have a player whose greatest strength, his relentless, sideline-to-sideline dominance against the run, was never fully written into the record books at all. There was no number to point to, no leaderboard with his name near the top, just the memory of the men who played against him, and memory alone has never been enough to open the doors of a museum. He was punished twice, once by history's incomplete numbers, and once by a league that never seemed eager to look back at the team that embarrassed it the most. On and off the field, for the better part of 2 decades. In 2018, the football world tried to make a small correction. Villapiano was inducted into the Reese's Senior Bowl Hall of Fame, and Jersey Shore fans voted him their region's greatest sports personality. Small but meaningful reminders that people back home never forgot what he gave to the game. The next year, he was named a senior class candidate for the Pro Football Hall of Fame itself, a nomination reserved for players whose careers ended long ago and deserve one more look from the voters who decide these things. It felt, for a moment, like the door might finally open. He did not get in. As of today, decades after his final game, he still hasn't. But here's the part of Phil Villapiano's story that no stat sheet could ever capture, and it goes right back to that phone call. Months after the Immaculate Reception, the play that broke his heart in front of the entire country, Villapiano found himself at an awards banquet back home in New Jersey. Franco Harris, the very man who had caught that impossible touchdown, was being honored that night as an outstanding Italian-American athlete. It could have been an awkward, even bitter reunion. Instead, Villapiano's parents happened to be sitting in that same room. And somewhere between the speeches and the small talk, the 2 families discovered something strange, something neither man could have predicted walking into that banquet hall. Villapiano's father and Harris's mother came from the exact same region of Italy. 2 men on opposite sides of the most painful moment of Villapiano's career suddenly found themselves connected by something deeper than football, something that had been waiting in their bloodlines the whole time. From that night forward, an unlikely friendship began to grow, quietly, year after year, far away from any football field. Villapiano and Harris ate meals together. They brought their children to meet each other. They showed up for each other's charity events for decades, long after both men had retired from the game and moved on to entirely new chapters of their lives. Villapiano would even bring Harris along to business meetings in Pennsylvania, proud to introduce his old rival as one of his closest friends. Two men who once stood on opposite sides of the most painful, most argued-over play in football history had somehow built something that had nothing to do with football at all. And every single year, on December 23rd, the anniversary of the Immaculate Reception, Franco Harris would call Phil Villapiano on the phone and ask him the same teasing question. "Hey Phil, what were you doing this time 30 years ago?" And Villapiano would growl back, half joking and half not, "We were getting screwed." And the two of them would laugh like it was the funniest thing in the world, because for them, it was never really about the football anymore. It was their way of saying they loved each other, without ever having to say those words out loud. In December of 2022, the NFL prepared to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. The Pittsburgh Steelers planned to retire Franco Harris's jersey number in front of a sold-out stadium. Villapiano booked his flight to Pittsburgh, ready to stand beside his old friend one more time and celebrate a play that had once broken his heart. 2 days before the ceremony, on December 21st, Franco Harris passed away in his sleep. He was 72 years old. Villapiano's own daughter had to be the one to tell him. He didn't believe her at first. He had spoken to Franco just that afternoon. It didn't seem possible. But it was true, and 3 days before Christmas, Phil Villapiano boarded his flight to Pittsburgh anyway. He walked through the airport and stopped in front of a statue of Franco Harris that greeted every traveler coming off the plane. There was a memorial book placed in front of it. Villapiano knelt down, picked up the pen, and wrote 4 words that said everything he could never quite say on those yearly phone calls. "You were the best. I will miss you." That, in the end, is who Phil Villapiano really was. A rookie who silenced a stadium in Cleveland. A linebacker who stood one step away from football immortality and one step away from heartbreak on the same iconic play. A warrior who forced a fumble at the goal line to help win a championship. A man who turned his most devastating professional moment into a 50-year friendship built on nothing but love. The NFL never gave him a bust in Canton. It never gave him the tackle statistics that would have proven what every teammate and every opponent already knew. But it could never take away the ring on his hand, the record he still holds, or the love of a friend who called him every single year without fail. Canton has never called his name. But every single person who ever played beside him, blocked against him, or loved him, already knows the truth. Phil Villapiano was never missing from football history. Football history simply forgot to write him down. And somewhere out there on December 23rd, an old friend is still waiting for a phone that will never ring again.